The courtroom lights felt colder than I remembered, like they'd been waiting for this day longer than I had. They glared against the polished floor, reflecting a version of me I barely recognized. Tired, composed, no longer afraid. Across the aisle sat Daniel, my business partner, my friend, the man who once promised we'd build everything together. Now he was sitting under oath, his tie perfectly straight, his lies even straighter. "Your Honor," he said, with the same confidence he used to sell our vision to investors, "I have proof. She stole the company funds." The room shifted. A few gasps. A whisper of my name from the gallery. My name, twisted through a story that didn't belong to me anymore. I didn't flinch. My lawyer had warned me, don't react, don't blink, don't feed the performance. So I sat there, silent, while Daniel painted me as the villain in the empire I'd built from sleepless nights and secondhand laptops. He told them how I'd betrayed him. He told them how I'd drained the account. He told them everything, except the truth. And the truth was patient. It was buried beneath invoices, passwords, and time-stamped emails I'd saved long before the first red flag. Truth doesn't shout. It waits. When the judge finally turned to me, asking if I had anything to say, I stood. The paper under my fingertips trembled, not from fear, but from memory. "Everything he said," I began quietly, "is almost true." A ripple went through the courtroom. Daniel's smile faltered, just for a second, because he knew that word almost meant something was coming. What the jury didn't know was that this wasn't a case about stolen money. It was a story about stolen trust, and how far one woman would go to take it back. That was the day I stopped being the victim of his story, and started becoming the author of mine. If I lost this case, it wouldn't just be about the money. It would mean losing the right to my own story. It would mean the world would remember me as the thief, not the woman who built something from nothing. My company had my name on it. Every invoice, every late-night email, every client deal sealed with trembling hands and tired eyes. It wasn't just a business. It was me, my dream, my fight, my identity. And now, that same name was being dragged through the dirt by the one person I'd once trusted more than myself. Daniel didn't just steal from me. He rewrote my life. He took our story, two dreamers building an empire from a single laptop and shared hope, and turned it into something ugly. Now, in front of a jury that barely knew me, he was painting me as the villain in the story I'd written with my own blood and sleepless nights. If they believed him, everything would crumble. The business I'd built from scratch. The clients who'd trusted my word. The friends who still didn't know who to believe. And the version of myself that still believed in goodness, in people. Because this wasn't just about contracts or spreadsheets or stolen cash. It was about faith, the kind that takes years to build and seconds to break. I could have walked away. I could have let the rumors bury me alive. But something inside me refused to die quietly. I'd already lost my savings, my peace, my so-called friend. I wasn't going to lose my name too. I still remember the night before the hearing. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Reporters, ex-clients, people who'd once cheered for me, now whispering behind locked screens. Did she really do it? Guess success changed her. It hurt. God, it hurt more than I can say. But pain has a strange way of teaching you who you are. That night, as I stared at the stack of evidence on my desk, every receipt, every email, every trace of truth I'd gathered, I made myself a promise. If this was the last battle I'd ever fight, I'd make it count. He'd already stolen the money. But the truth still belonged to me, and I was going to make sure the world heard it, no matter how long it took. We started with nothing but coffee, a borrowed laptop, and dreams that didn't fit inside our tiny office space. No investors. No fancy suits. Just two people who believed that if we worked hard enough, we could build something that mattered. Back then, success wasn't about profits, it was about survival. It was about staying awake through the nights when our only light came from the screen and the city we couldn't afford to live in yet. Daniel was the voice, confident, magnetic, the kind of man who could talk his way into a meeting and walk out with a signed deal. And me. I was the quiet one. The thinker. The one who stayed behind after everyone left, fixing typos, polishing slides, double-checking budgets that still didn't add up. We made a good team. Or at least, that's what I told myself. I still remember the night our first client said yes. We didn't have champagne, just a half-eaten pizza and 2 paper cups of cheap coffee that smelled like victory. He raised his cup and said, "To us, partners in everything." And for a moment I believed it. We worked like fire and air. He'd spark an idea, I'd make it breathe. Every success felt like proof that we were unstoppable. That all the late nights, the missed birthdays, the unpaid months, were leading somewhere beautiful. Our company started to grow faster than either of us could keep up with. Emails multiplied, clients lined up, and our tiny office suddenly felt too small for what we were becoming. People started saying our names together. Daniel and her, the dream team. He handled the charm, the pitch, the promises. I handled the plans, the people, the product. And it worked, until it didn't. Looking back now, I realize how small the cracks were in the beginning. A receipt that never made it to the accountant. A client meeting I wasn't copied on. A weekend trip he called networking. Back then, I brushed it off. You don't doubt the people you build dreams with. You tell yourself they're busy, they're tired, they're doing it all for the business. Because when you believe in someone, you start filling in their silences with your own trust. But trust can be dangerous when it's one-sided. I remember one night, it was past midnight, the office was empty, and I was checking our expenses for the quarter. A small inconsistency caught my eye. Nothing major, just a few missing invoices. I told myself it was an accounting glitch, but something about it felt off. The numbers didn't lie, but Daniel was good at making lies sound like numbers. The next morning, I asked him about it. He smiled, that same easy, practiced smile that could melt tension like ice. "Don't stress," he said. "Just a mix-up. I'll handle it." And he did. At least, that's what I thought. What I didn't know, what I couldn't see then, was that while I was staying up fixing our future, he was quietly preparing his exit. Every signature, every password, every deal, he was rewriting the foundation beneath my feet. I was building a company. He was building a way out. And by the time I realized it, he was already gone. The first crack didn't sound like thunder. It whispered. Soft. Easy to ignore. It began on a Tuesday. Quiet, ordinary, forgettable. An invoice went missing. Just one. I thought maybe I'd misfiled it, or the accountant had. It wasn't worth a fight. But Daniel, always the charmer, laughed and said, "Guess even success comes with a little creative chaos." I laughed too, because at that point, doubt still felt like betrayal. But then there was another one. And another. Tiny amounts. Numbers that didn't quite add up. Small enough to overlook, but large enough to leave a mark if you looked too closely. I told myself it was fine. Because when you care about someone, you start mistaking denial for loyalty. Then came the password changes. He said it was for security. You know how hackers are these days, he joked. Except somehow only he had access. When I asked for the new credentials, he smiled that same practiced smile and said, "Later, you're busy enough already." Let me handle this part. And just like that, a wall started rising between us, one excuse at a time. The meetings changed next. Clients who used to call me suddenly stopped. Projects that were once ours became his. He said I was better off focusing on the operations, that he'd handle the external stuff. And I believed him. Because it's hard to question someone when your whole dream is tied to their name too. But lies don't always shout. Sometimes they just rearrange the furniture. Until one day, you realize you're living in a room you don't recognize. One night, I stayed back at the office long after everyone left. The building was quiet except for the hum of the old air conditioner. I passed by Daniel's office, the door slightly open, a thin line of light spilling through. I should have kept walking, but something, maybe instinct, maybe fear, made me stop. On his desk were two versions of the same contract. One bore my signature. The other didn't. And the signature on his copy? Perfect. Too perfect. My handwriting, traced, copied, practiced. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It wasn't the discovery that hurt, it was the familiarity of it. He'd studied my signature like he'd studied me, learning exactly how to use it when it mattered most. The next morning, I confronted him. My voice trembled, but my heart didn't. I told him what I saw. He didn't even blink. He just leaned back, folded his hands, and said, "You're tired. You've been overworking. Maybe you're just seeing what you want to see." Gaslighting. Smooth. Effortless. The kind of manipulation you can't prove, only feel. And for a split second, he almost had me convinced again. Because when someone you trust tells you you're crazy, you start to wonder if maybe you are. But that moment changed something in me. It was the first time I saw him not as my partner, but as a stranger wearing the face of someone I once called friend. That night, I went home and opened every account, every document, every email thread. Each one told the same story. Small gaps, quiet deletions, little lies stacking up like dominoes. And I knew, when they fell, they'd fall right on top of me. Lies like interest always grow, and his were about to come due. It happened on a Monday morning, the kind of morning that feels ordinary, where everything is supposed to go right. Coffee brewing, emails waiting, a to-do list already running through my head. I opened my laptop, ready to start another busy week. Routine, predictable, safe, until it wasn't. Our business account loaded slowly, the little spinning circle on the screen, mocking my patience. And then it stopped spinning. Zeros. Just zeros. Where 6 figures used to be. I blinked, convinced it was a glitch. Refreshed the page once, twice, 10 times. Still zeros. My throat went dry. I felt my pulse in my fingertips as I reached for my phone. The bank's hold music played too long, too calm for the storm I was in. When the representative finally spoke, her voice was soft, the kind of softness people use before they say something that'll break you. "The transfers were authorized," she said, "by Mr. Daniel Blake." Authorized. That word hit harder than any betrayal could. Because it wasn't just stolen, it was signed off. My partner. My friend. The man who once told me, "We're in this together, no matter what." His office chair was empty when I arrived. The drawers were half open, like someone had left in a hurry. Documents gone. Laptop gone. Even the photo, the one from our first client pitch, where we stood side by side, smiling like fools, gone. It felt like walking into a crime scene where the weapon was trust itself. By noon, the rumors had already started. Someone from the bank must have talked. By the time I opened my inbox, it wasn't filled with client work, it was filled with questions. Did you know about this? Is it true? Are you involved? Each one felt like a paper cut across my skin, small but sharp enough to bleed. The calls came next. Angry voices. Disappointed ones. One client's words still echo in my mind. We can't risk working with someone under investigation. Investigation. That word buried me deeper than the theft itself. Because in one day, I went from being the co-founder to the accused. By evening, headlines had twisted the story into something unrecognizable. Businesswoman under scrutiny after funds vanish. Partners turn enemies. The truth wasn't missing, it was replaced. I tried calling him. Once. Twice. Dozens of times. Voicemail. Every time. The final message I sent was short, only 3 words. How could you? He never answered. He didn't have to. His silence said enough. And the world. It answered for him, with doubt, with whispers, with silence that cut deeper than any accusation. That night, I sat in the office, the same space where we once dreamed out loud, planned late into the night, and promised each other we'd never turn into them, the kind of people who forgot where they started. The walls were still painted that pale blue we'd picked together. The logo we designed still hung above the door. But everything else felt foreign. Empty. Because betrayal doesn't announce itself. It doesn't kick the door down or shout in your face. It moves quietly. Deletes files. Clears accounts. Leaves your name behind for the world to question. And that night, as the screen glowed in front of me, showing that cruel row of zeros, I realized something that changed me forever. Betrayal doesn't end when someone walks away. It ends when you stop letting them define your story. If this story stayed with you, don't scroll yet. Hit like so more people find the strength to rise after betrayal, and subscribe for more true stories that turn pain into power. Because sometimes, the worst heartbreak doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the person who once promised they'd never hurt you. Months later, we met again. Not in the office we built, not in the coffee shop where ideas were born, but under the sterile glare of courtroom lights. Everything smelled like paper, old wood, and tension. And there he was, Daniel, sitting just a few feet away. The same man who once toasted to our future with cheap champagne, now sitting in a pressed suit and polished shoes, ready to erase me with words. He looked smaller somehow, or maybe I just saw him clearly for the first time. The confidence he once wore like armor had turned into a costume. Borrowed. Fragile. Temporary. When he took the stand, his voice was calm. Smooth. Steady. Rehearsed. He talked about me like I was a stranger, poor management, emotional decisions, irresponsible spending. He even smiled between sentences, like this was just another pitch, another deal to close. Each word felt like a blade, polished and aimed. He wasn't defending himself. He was rewriting me, again. The jury sat quietly, pens moving, eyes shifting from him to me and back again. Their faces unreadable. Their silence deafening. My lawyer leaned in and whispered, "Stay calm. Facts don't need volume." So I did. I kept my hands steady on the table, the same way I had the day I first discovered the missing money. Because truth doesn't panic. It waits. When it was finally my turn, I stood up. No theatrics. No tears. Just air thick enough to cut through. I carried a thin folder, nothing fancy, no dramatic pile of evidence. Just one folder I'd kept from the very first time something didn't add up. The judge nodded. "You may proceed." I stepped forward, my heels echoing in the quiet room, and placed the folder on the evidence table. Page by page, I laid it out. emails, timestamps, receipts, bank statements, each one connecting like dots in a picture I'd been forced to draw. And then, the contract. The one he'd forged. His signature, copied perfectly over mine. I could almost feel the air change as I slid it forward. The jury leaned closer. Even Daniel stopped breathing for a moment. I didn't look at him yet. Not yet. I wanted him to feel it, the slow unraveling of the web he'd spun so carefully. He shifted in his seat, straightened his tie, looked toward his lawyer for reassurance. But even his lawyer's expression had changed, from confidence to quiet realization. When the judge asked, "Do you have anything else to add?" I said only this: I trusted him with everything, and I kept proof of how he used it. That sentence hung in the air like smoke, slow, heavy, impossible to ignore. His lawyer stammered, tried to object, tried to twist, but the truth was already standing on its own. Because data doesn't lie, and charm can't save you from evidence. Daniel tried to speak, something about misunderstanding, confusion, but the words came out hollow. Even he knew it was over. For the first time since this nightmare began, he didn't look like a leader, or a genius, or a partner. He looked like what he truly was, a man caught in the ruins of his own lies. The jury watched him differently now, not with curiosity, but with clarity. And for a brief moment, I stopped seeing him as my betrayer. He was just small. A reminder of how far I'd come from the woman who once believed his every word. Justice didn't need to shout that day. It just needed to breathe. And finally, it did. The silence before the verdict felt heavier than air, thick, unmoving, electric. No one shifted. No one dared to breathe. Even the walls seemed to hold their breath, waiting. The judge's eyes moved slowly across the courtroom, first the jury, then Daniel, then me. That gaze felt endless, like time itself had been suspended between truth and consequence. I could hear the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights above, the ticking of a clock somewhere far away. Every sound felt louder than it should. And then, the words that shattered the stillness. "We find in favor of the plaintiff." For a moment, I didn't react. My body refused to believe what my ears had heard. The words hung in the air, soft, steady, absolute, like dawn after a night that refused to end. And then, something inside me cracked open. Not from pain this time, from release. A slow, trembling exhale I didn't realize I'd been holding since the morning I logged into that empty account. Across the room, Daniel didn't move. His hands, once always in motion, now lay still on the table. The same hands that had signed the contracts, shaken clients' palms, written lies into numbers. Now they trembled. His shoulders slumped as if the weight of every deceit he'd built finally settled where it belonged, on him. He didn't look at me. He couldn't. Because eye contact requires courage, and his was long gone. The charm that used to light up boardrooms was gone. The smirk that once made me doubt myself, gone. All that remained was silence and consequence. The courtroom began to stir. Chairs moved. Papers shuffled. Voices rose in hushed tones. But to me, it all sounded distant, like echoes underwater. Because the loudest sound was inside me, the soft click of something broken finally finding its place again. For the first time in months, my body felt light. Not because I'd won, but because I'd survived. I didn't smile, not out of pride, but peace. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, steady and unshakable. As I gathered my files, the same folder I once clutched like a lifeline, I noticed my hands. They weren't shaking anymore. The paper didn't feel heavy. Even the air in the room felt different, cleaner, freer. I walked toward the doors, the same marble floors I had once crossed with trembling steps. But this time, I wasn't running from shame. I was walking toward freedom. Reporters whispered my name. Some faces turned, curious, cautious, the same ones that once printed my downfall. But I didn't stop. Because I didn't owe the world an explanation anymore. The truth had already spoken for me. Outside, the sunlight felt warmer than I remembered. The wind carried no judgment, no pity, just peace. I paused on the courthouse steps, breathing in the world that was finally mine again. Because that day, I didn't just win a case. I reclaimed my name, my dignity, my story. And for the first time since the betrayal began, I felt whole again. Months later, I unlocked the door to a new office. Not the old one. That chapter had burned itself closed. This one had sunlight streaming through tall windows, white walls that smelled of paint and possibility, and a new name etched on the glass. Mine. For a moment, I just stood there, keys still in hand, listening to the hum of silence. It wasn't empty anymore. It was peaceful. People often ask if I ever learned to trust again. I smile when they do, because trust was never the problem. Blind faith was. I used to believe loyalty meant closing your eyes to someone's flaws. Now I know, real trust means keeping them open, even when it hurts. The world didn't hand me my reputation back. I had to earn it, inch by inch, meeting by meeting, signature by signature. Some doors stayed closed. Some people looked the other way. But the right ones, they saw the fight in my eyes and opened their hearts anyway. Clients came back slowly, like cautious birds testing a new branch. And every time someone said, "We believe in you," I whispered back, "So do I." This time, I didn't just rebuild a company. I built boundaries. No more shared passwords. No more blind trust disguised as teamwork. Every decision now carries my fingerprint, clear, deliberate, and earned. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about that courtroom. Not with anger anymore, but with gratitude. Because that was the day I stopped trying to prove my worth to people who never deserved it. That was the day I learned that closure doesn't come from revenge. It comes from peace. They once said I'd never recover. Maybe they were right. Because I didn't recover. I rebuilt. And the version of me who walked out of that courtroom? She wasn't the same woman who walked in. The one who walked out was quieter, but stronger. Softer, but sharper. She learned that survival isn't about holding on to what's gone. It's about letting go of what tried to destroy you and still choosing to rise. Some days, when I lock up at night, I glance at that name on the door, the one that's finally mine, and I smile. Because I didn't just win a case. I won myself back. So if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, if you've ever had to rebuild from ashes someone else set on fire, remember this. Justice is powerful, but peace is freedom. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't winning in court. It's walking out free, with your truth intact, your name clean, and your head held high. And before you go, tell me where you're watching from. Because I want to know. How far has your comeback taken you? The sun had already set outside my new office window, but the city lights looked different now. Softer, almost kind. I sat there for a while, staring at the faint reflection of myself in the glass. Not the woman who lost everything. The one who refused to stay lost. And maybe that's what justice really means. Not erasing the past, but learning how to live beyond it. If my story found you tonight, maybe it's because some part of you needed to hear this, that you can start over, that endings can be beginnings in disguise. So stay with me. There are more stories like this, of betrayal, truth, and quiet revenge that doesn't destroy, but rebuilds. Hit like if you've ever fought your way back from silence, and subscribe if you believe that sometimes the strongest comeback is simply surviving with grace. Because my story isn't just mine anymore. It's ours. The kind that reminds you, you can lose everything and still win yourself back.